Hello and welcome to this discussion on our international issues and bilateral issues. One major area I am yet to cover is definitely India and China. I will be doing it, but right now I will be talking about the United Nations and some of the international institutions. So that that is equally important. So in our bilateral discussion, one major area, yes, I will be doing. So right now, let me talk about the United Nations and its origin and the the basic the introduction to that. Okay, United Nations and introduction, that is the first discussion I would like to do. Then I will be talking about various aspects, its reforms, and it is 75 years of so I am perfectly fine. So Shailsa, Shailji. Okay. So thank you so much for inquiring. And anyway, is trade relations, Saurav is asking, is trade relation or one of the soft power policy? See, we can, if you are giving concession and all, we can say trade relations also can be termed as soft power. Okay. Anyway, so coming to United Nations, the first point, first discussion is about the the formation and the various aspects of the United Nations. So UN was created, United Nations as an institution was started in 1945 and it was created by the Allied forces. Okay. The Allied forces who who were fighting against the Axis power in the Second World War, Allied forces in the Second World War. In the Second World War, and in fact, the fight was against the Axis power, where the main forces were Germany, Japan, Italy, and such forces. Okay. And in fact, this idea of UN, see, before United Nations, there was a concept of League of Nations. League of Nations were created during the or after the First World War, and but unfortunately the League of Nations could not survive, it could not prevent the Second World War, and many shortcomings were there, and that is why this discussion on the United Nations started in 1942 itself by the Allied powers, and the US President at that time, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, okay, Franklin D. Roosevelt took initiative in, or rather he was in the forefront in the formation of the UN, a US President, and even the League of Nations at that time, Woodrow Wilson, the American President at that time, he took initiative. In fact, both the institutions were created with the initiative of an American President, and FDR is considered one of the all-time great American presidents. He has contributed immensely because he helped America to come out of the great economic depression of 1930s, late 1920s and early 1930s. Then he led America to come out victorious in the Second World War, and in the process he also took initiative for the creation of United Nations. So this FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, played a very crucial role, absolutely no doubt regarding this, and the 26 Allied powers were there at that time, Allied powers in the war, including British India. British India was a party to the war. British India joined the war, even though Indian National Congress leaders were not in favor of British India joining the war, but British India also joined the war. Please do not forget this. And because the British India, the decision was not taken by Indian leaders, it was taken by the Britishers. the Viceroy or the British Indian leaders took the decision, the Britishers took the decision, and even India was party to the war. So, in the Allied powers who negotiated for the creation of the United Nations, even India was there. British India, of course, it was British India, but India was definitely there. And finally, in 1945, so from 1942 onwards, the discussion started. In 1945, in San Francisco meet, in the meeting in San Francisco, okay, during April to June 1945. April to June 1945, the fine prints of the United Nations were written down and even agreed upon. The fine prints of the United Nations were agreed upon between April to June 1945, and so that is where the UN Charter was finalized. Okay, this is where the UN Charter was finalized. Okay, so I started by saying that United Nations, it's an introduction, that is a heading, and 1945, United Nations came into being. Allied forces of the Second World War took the initiative. Axis power, that is Germany, Japan, Italy, and all were on the other side, but the Allied powers defeated the Axis power in the Second World War. Even before UN, there was an organization called League of Nations. It was started after the First World War, and that initiative was taken by another American president at that time, Woodrow Wilson. But in the United Nations, the negotiations started in 1942 itself, and the person who was in the forefront was the American president, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He is considered one of the all-time great American presidents, and he took the initiative. He led America from the economic depression, he led America from the Second World War, and and made victorious in the Second World War. So 26 Allied powers were there in the war, including British India. And this 1945, the final discussions were held in San Francisco from April to June, and the UN Charter was finalized. Okay, so the UN Charter was finalized. And the UN Charter was final, and on 26th of June 1945, okay, 26th of June 1945, the 26th of June 1945, the Charter was signed. The Charter was signed. On 26th of June, the Charter was signed. And the Charter came into force on 24th of October 1945. The Charter came into force. On 24th of October, the Charter came into force. And at the time, in the beginning, when the Charter came into force, on 1945, 51 member countries were there. 51 members started, or the initial members are 51, including India. So, in 1945 itself, India was a party to this UN, even before India got independent, because British India joined it. So, it was a matter of months before India was supposed to get independence. So, negotiations were anyway going on. So, there is no doubt regarding whether India will get independence or not. Only thing was what are the conditions of the independence. That is the only thing which was there. Anyway, 51 members were there in the beginning, and right now in 2020, when you look, we have almost 193 members. 193 members are there, are the UN members. Only very few countries are there which is outside the UN, where a couple of applicants are there. One is definitely Palestine. Another applicant is Kosovo. So, these are some of the applicants whose application has not been accepted. Kosovo as an independent country has not been identified. Palestine has not been allowed to join till now. So, originally there are 51 members. This 51 has increased to 193 in the, this is 1945 and 2020, it is, we are talking about 75 years of the UN in 2020, there are 193 members. And what is the aim, what are the according to the UN, some of the aim of the UN, number one, international peace and security, international peace and security. Number two, to develop friendly relations between the nations, to develop friendly relations between the countries, okay, to develop friendly relations between the countries based on equality and self determination. Okay, what is that? Countries based on equality and self determination, based on equality and self determination. And number three, to solve all international social, economic, cultural and humanitarian issues, to solve international, social, economic, cultural issues, various issues facing the world at that time, to solve these problems. So, number one, international peace and security. Number two, develop friendly relations between member countries based on equality and self determination, because there are so many colonies at that time. So, the people should determine who should rule, self determination. And number three, solve international social, economic, cultural issues, and also and even humanitarian issues, cultural, humanitarian issues, because there are a lot of humanitarian issues at that time. And number four, to promote human rights, because human rights was a big casualty during the Second World War, to promote human rights. So, the aim and objective of the UN was to resolve the problems of the world, to bring in peace and security, because please remember the human rights, the violation of the human rights, more than 6 million Jews were killed during this time, the Holocaust. The Holocaust, 6 million Jews were massacred, the genocide, the killing of an entire community by the Germans. It is the worst genocide in the history of mankind, we can say. 6 million Jews were killed. So, there were a lot of concerns about this human rights. That is why the UN Declaration of Human Rights came in 1948 itself. Please do not forget, United Nations Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, because the whole world was shocked by the kind of killing and the atrocities which were meted out to one section of the people in the world, that is the Jewish community. Anyway, so the Holocaust and the kind of human rights violation has prompted the world to talk about the promotion of the human rights. The promotion of the human rights was a big issue during the formation of the United Nations. Now, coming to the structure, before moving into, so this is how the UN was formed. These were the aims and objectives of the United Nations as an institution. This is very important for all of us. And human rights, promotion of human rights were a major concern. India was one of the founder members of the UN, do not forget this, because British India was part of the Allied forces. Otherwise, the US President Franklin D. Roosevelt played a very crucial role in the formation of the UN as an institution. And the UN wanted to, or rather this institution learned a couple of lessons from the failures of the League of Nations. So, and this new institution was created and formed in 1945, and 2020, it is 75 years of 2020, it is 75 years of the formation of the UN. Okay. So, that is the first part, in the introduction to the UN and the formation of the UN. Now, moving ahead, I mean that is the first part.